continuation from last week. I asked the third question last week under the solid waste agenda item and received no answer. The purpose of the question was to ascertain whether or not a public hearing or additional future agenda item might be in order. I respectfully request an answer to the question in order to decide whether or not to make a Bonner County Ordinance 1200B request for a future agenda item. The answer to the question is permitted by BOCO Ordinance 1200B. And the question is, will the increase in expenses negatively affect other advertised solid waste facility improvements per the plan? That was one question. I'd like to ask this question also. Does the current household hazardous facility meet all federal requirements? The current one.
To the best of my knowledge.
To the best of your knowledge. And does the proposed household hazardous waste building improvement, being the bid schedule items B and C that were not acted upon, which were omitted or eliminated, help to meet that federal requirement, or do they elevate the federal requirement? And so I don't know if you can answer that one. If they meet it, it would be to elevate it. If they don't meet it, they would have to be to meet it.
Yeah, it'd be a Bob or Melissa question.
Okay, so perhaps you can, get those answers and give us another future agenda item on the solid waste where that can come up and be answered, because I'd like to look into that. Commissioner Omat, to state last week that you were excited that this is a great project is troubling. The solid waste fact is the improvement plan of 2019-2020 was arguably a great project by looking at the vote count prior to last week's notice that we're receiving far less than what was advertised in that presentation period in 2021, because we're not getting a lot of it. So if it was arguably a great project then, it's certainly not a great project now. Minimum receipt of a voter-approved package wrapped in a bow tie accolade is highly discouraging. It's an insult to the taxpayer. The BOCC sold the taxpayer an annual increase to $185 based on the content of the plan, 2019-2020 plan, Resolution 2135, and the May 2021 COVID-19 era ballot language. I'll give you to next week to identify which improvements in bid A through E do not currently pre-bid acceptance meet federal requirements. Again, I request a solid waste agenda item for next week or the week after to answer these questions. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, the answer to my question last week relating to the issue of fair and natural resource board selection was answered with dissenting opinion. I'll also ask again in another way. Mr. Chairman, please correct me if I'm mistaken. You alone, without anyone else's recommendations, selected the nominees that would receive interviews for the respective board position, which ultimately resulted in the names being placed on last week's BOCC agenda item. Is that correct?
I selected them. We all interviewed them. We all discussed them.
The question was, if I'm mistaken, you alone, without anyone else's recommendation, selected the nominees that would be receiving interviews and then ultimately put on the agenda. Is that correct?
I probably did, but we can all suggest this one get interviewed or that one get interviewed.
Okay, I'll ask the other commissioners if you could answer yes or no only to that question, as it is a sensitive item. Did anyone else, other than the three board members, have any involvement in the recommendations for the names of the Fair Board appointees or the Natural Resource Board appointees?
So I'm not going to answer yes or no because I want to say I didn't give any recommendations for the board. I asked that everyone who applied be interviewed.
I like that.
Sorry,
Right.
so I didn't recommend anyone. I said everyone should
No,
be.
did you receive a recommendation from
No.
anyone else other than
No.
either one? Or,
No.
Did you receive a recommendation from anyone else?
I received a lot of feedback from members of Bonner County on both, actually.
Okay, so if you say you did, and Commissioner Bradshaw is saying that he's the one that did it, then how does what you got enter that paper when he says he's the only one that did it?
Mr. Rose, I said I received a lot of feedback.
But you didn't communicate.
No, I did communicate.
Then if you communicated, he got the recommendation from you and not
We
necessarily.
sat down as a board and had this conversation.
Okay, well, that doesn't square with what the chairman just stated. And I'd like to also add, am I on 3 minutes or 5?
You're past, I believe.
Okay, I'll save it for next week. Thank you.
Thanks. George?